We're proud to support the craft of journalism. UBS brings you the latest news from around the world with The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Be part of an international network that brings together leading insights, research, and technology across 24 time zones and 12 key financial hubs, with you at the center of it all. UBS. Advice is our craft.
You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 29th of April 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist in association with UBS. Live from London, this is The Globalist with me, Emma Nelson. A very warm welcome to today's programme. Coming up.
Canada's next government will be a Liberal government. This marks a fourth Liberal mandate, very rare in Canadian politics.
As expected, Mark Carney, a man with no political experience but a wealth of crisis management skills, and his Liberals win the Canadian elections. We'll have the latest reaction to a man and his party who'll take on a country divided domestically but united against Donald Trump. Also coming up, with widespread power cuts across Spain and Portugal, we'll have the latest following warnings that the blackout could last all week. Plus, after a terrorist attack in Kashmir, India and Pakistan rattle sabres. But what's the likelihood of tensions spilling over? And
this multi-brand store became like a big cultural hub for the young audience of Jakarta.
We'll find out how one creative leader uses retail to bring together a next generation of young Indonesians. Plus the papers, and Japan's Prime Minister heads to Vietnam to forge new ties. That's all coming up on The Globalist, live from London. First, a quick look at what else is happening in today's news. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused Russia of trying to manipulate and deceive the world by declaring a 3-day unilateral ceasefire for next week. The head of the Israeli Domestic Intelligence Service, Ronen Bar, has resigned in the wake of a fierce dispute with the Prime Minister, and Iran's Interior Minister says a deadly explosion at the country's largest commercial port was caused by negligence and a failure to comply with safety measures. Stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on these stories. But first, Mark Carney's Liberal Party is projected to win the Canadian elections, securing a remarkable comeback. The former governor of the Banks of England and Canada won what's been described as one of the most consequential elections in decades. Although the final results aren't yet confirmed, the CBC called the election a few hours ago. And to join us now to tell us more, I'm sitting next to me is Paul Waldy, Europe correspondent at the Globe and Mail. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning.
Welcome back. So the first question I suppose we have to ask you is, has America's Donald Trump just won the election for the Canadian Liberals?
He certainly helped Mark Carney a lot. I mean, given where the Liberal Party was just in December, 20 points behind the Conservatives, facing the real prospect of being almost wiped out as a political party in Canada. Now they're on the verge of forming another government, their fourth successive government. So really, this is something that, Trump, I think, will have to take some credit or whatever for getting Carney across the finish line, at least in terms of forming the government. Now, whether it's a majority or not still remains to be seen. And that will be a big issue for Mark Carney going forward.
Yes, just explain this to us now. We'll come to Mark Carney in a moment and the personality of Carney that may well have pulled everything over the line for the Liberals. But as it stands, the Liberals do not have enough votes or enough seats to win a majority in the Canadian Parliament. So just explain how things are as we go to air.
Right. They need 172 seats to govern as a majority government. They are just shy of that. They're around the 166 mark right now, and that could change because a lot of advanced poll numbers are still being counted in many ridings across the country, which could, and some of these seats have been very, very close calls. So it could go either way over the next few days. But as it stands right now, they don't have a majority government. That will not strengthen Carney's position as he negotiates with Donald Trump over tariff issues and faces off against, the biggest threat facing Canada in a long long, long time. He also doesn't have a natural ally in Parliament anymore. The New Democrats propped up the last Liberal minority government. They've been really hammered in this election. They're down to about 7 seats. That may not be enough to help the Liberals out. The Bloc Québécois certainly won't help the Liberals or do them any favors because of their long-standing history. And, of course, the Conservatives are the opposition, and they've actually done better than a lot of people expected. So I think for Carney, if he doesn't have a majority, it's going to be very, very difficult.
Okay, so just let's look at Mark Carney. As you mentioned there, the prospect of facing a minority government, but these results are coming at here in London, it's 4 minutes past 7 in the morning. So we will have a clearer idea as the day goes on. But in terms of the victory, is this one man's win? Is this Carney's?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no question about that. There was a poll over the weekend that showed if you strip out the party leaders and just ask people which political party they support, the Conservatives still had a 20-point lead. So this is very much all about Mark Carney. People saw him as the leader best able to tackle Donald Trump, the leader best able to go up against the whole tariff fight, certainly more able than Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservatives. However, there were still lingering issues in the country in terms of cost of living, housing, all of these many other issues that have dogged the Liberal Party for many, many years. And those, it looks like, came back to haunt them towards the end of the campaign, which I think is what gave the Conservatives a little bit of a boost at the end. And
just looking at what Carney now has to do, you have sort of painted a picture of two Carneys, or two Canadas here. We have a Canada which domestically was very much ready to get rid of the Liberals at the end of last year. It has a cost of living crisis. It has housing crises, all of which have not gone away. An incredibly divided electorate. So Mark Carney has to try to unite them. He also, however, has to take a united Canada and take on Donald Trump. So let's talk about the Trump aspect first. There's a change of tone coming from Washington when it comes to the way that Trump talks about Mark Carney. He called him the Prime Minister, for starters, whereas he was incredibly scathing and dismissive of Justin Trudeau, calling him just the governor of Canada. A real put down. So clearly there is a sense that Trump has respect for Carney.
He did, but if he views these election results as a sign of weakness, the fact that Carney didn't win a big mandate, one of the reasons it's believed that Trump has some respect for Keir Starmer because he won a big election victory last summer. Carney has not won that big victory, so Trump can't look at him as going, well, this is a guy who's really delivered. He hasn't. So that may be a bit of a sign of weakness. We also saw on election day in Canada, Trump sending out a message suggesting that Canada once again should become the 51st state. So, he's still of that mindset. Carney mentioned that in his victory speech today, talking about how, Trump wants to divide and conquer Canada and really take over Canada, resources, water, everything. So this is going to be a very fractious relationship, no doubt about it. However, I do think Carney has shown, at least in his first dealings with Trump early on, that he has kind of the measured response, that he's not kind of flying off the handle or anything like that. And they have been pretty measured in their response so far to the tariffs. But now it gets really difficult.
It's been firm, though. I mean, Carney has stood up to him from day one. This is, he has not said we're going to come cap in hand or we want to negotiate. He's just went, no, this is.
He has. And I think the one thing he's also articulated very clearly is that no matter what happens, it's a very changed dynamic now. Canada is in a very different relationship with the United States. Canada has to get its own house in order in terms of going forward. Canada now finally has to start looking at other markets, something the country has never done and has talked about doing for about 60 years. So I do think he's also reflecting back into the country itself and saying, okay, this is the new reality. We better adjust to it and we better adapt as well as take on Trump.
Internationally, this could be just exactly what Canada needs.
It could well be. I mean, I think, Canada's had a free trade agreement with the European Union for many, many years, and really most Canadian businesses don't know anything about it. So I think now people are waking up to the fact that there are other countries in the world that we need to start trading with and we need to start working more closely with. Carney became, of course, Prime Minister in March when he took over the leadership of the Liberal Party. His very first trips were to Paris and London to, again, reinforce the notion that Canada has a broader world to look at beyond just the United States. And, 80% of our trade has been with the U.S. It's been too easy, really, for a long time. So I think now this is, as they say, a pretty big wake-up call for the country.
I mean, Canada can now perhaps sort of step into the shoes that it should, in theory, occupy, given, for starters, its size, given for its proximity, and also given for its international reputation, which, dare I say it, under Justin Trudeau, it didn't thrive in the latter years of his tenure.
It really didn't, and I think Trudeau was a lame duck for many years, probably throughout his last premiership since he won only a minority government last time around. And I think his standing on the world stage had faded and diminished. Carney will bring some serious gravitas to the world stage, having served as governor of the Bank of England, governor of the Bank of Canada. He's probably better known internationally in these kind of circles than Trudeau was, probably better respected. So I think that will give him some leverage internationally. But, it still doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. It's how he relates to Trump that still matters to Canada and to Canada's economy.
And so he will fight, and the Liberals will fight Canada's corner internationally. Let's turn to the domestic situation. I mean, Mark Carney's been described as he'll always be the cleverest man in any room that he stands in. And he has a reputation for managing crises. This is in no political experience yet. The financial crash in the global financial crash and how he represented the United Kingdom there, steering the UK through the aftermath of the Brexit vote. He knows what he's doing when the proverbial hits the fan, but does he have any relatability to a Canadian public, which you say has not voted for the Liberals in the way that many expected them to?
And still don't like the Liberal Party, by and large, are not really keen that the Liberals are back in power. A big chunk of the population is not keen on that. Everybody is kind of unsold on Mark Carney yet because he hasn't been prime minister really in a functioning way. We're going to see how he does. I mean, it's going to be a huge challenge for him. There's a housing crisis. There's a cost of living crisis. There's a lot of challenges facing Canadians above and beyond Donald Trump and tariffs. And Carney now has to deliver on that. There's talk of him delivering a budget in the next few weeks. That's going to be very important. How he delivers on spending and how he delivers on some of the things he said during the campaign. He was not the most dynamic campaigner or explainer of what he wants to do, so I think that's going to be a challenge for him. And he's going to have an opposition leader. Now, Pierre Poilievre is on the verge maybe of losing his own seat, which is going to be a problem for him. But he has announced today he's not going to step down as leader, and he very much is a aggressive opposition leader who will go after Carney. The Bloc Québécois will certainly be looking for a fight with Carney. So, it will be a really telling time for him in the next few weeks, not just internationally, but of course domestically too.
Pierre Poilievre being possibly one of the most unlucky characters ever to run in Canadian politics. I mean, what lies now for the Conservatives? Because in theory, they possibly haven't been beaten domestically. It is just the external world which has shaped politics.
They are trying to put a good gloss on this, that their seat count went up, that their vote tally went up, that this is the best vote tally they've had since 1988. But they have to look at the fact of where they were just a few months ago. They were supposed to win a huge majority. They have not. They have lost for the fourth straight time. Pierre Poilievre really has to look in the mirror at his leadership style, his aggressive leadership style, and whether that resonated with Canadians. He's lost his own seat, so that becomes a logistical problem. He's going to have to find a way back into Parliament somewhere else. So I think they have a lot of reflecting to do, and it will be interesting to see if the party does come out against him, if there are factions within the party that come out against him. We haven't seen that yet. I think people are willing to accept the fact that they did a little bit better than a lot of people thought going into this campaign, but they didn't win. They didn't come anywhere close to what they were supposed to. And Pierre Poilievre's approach and style clearly fell flat for a lot of people.
Paul Waldie, thank you so much for joining me in the studio. You're listening to The Globalist.
Craft is its own reward, which is why at UBS, we're honoured to work alongside over 50 of today's leading Nobel laureates, each an expert in the art of economic science, bringing you engaging discussions, actionable insights, and inspired solutions, all focused around the questions that shape our world today. For a better outlook, find a Nobel perspective. UBS. Banking is our craft.
(11:13 a.m. in Islamabad, 7:13 a.m. here in London. Now, if the purpose of terrorism is to cripple a society with fear and to destabilise the status quo, then last week's attack in the disputed region of Kashmir seems to have achieved its aim with terrible efficiency. Pakistan's defence minister has said that a military incursion by India is imminent. India blames Pakistan for the attack and has dismissed Pakistan's call for an independent investigation. To bring us up to date, I'm joined now by Lindy Prickett, who's Monocle's New Delhi correspondent. A very good morning to you, Lindy.
Good morning.
How close are we now to military action by India?
Well, If I knew that, I would I'd be betting on horses. I can tell you that it's all anybody is talking about here. We unfortunately have a past instance to go by, which was 6 years ago, and the attack and the response when, if you remember, there was a suicide bomber who attacked a military or a large group of police force that was on the move on the Jammu highway in Srinagar, and they were attacked. And it was about 9-10 days after that the military response was there. Everybody is wondering what's going to happen now, and is there going to be a response? A few days ago, Modi had was addressing a crowd in which he said that there was going to be a unimaginable response. In fact, he switched to English to say India will identify, track, and punish every terrorist and their backers. He said, we will pursue them to the ends of the earth. Very interestingly, he never used the word Pakistan. Of course, debates over words have also been rife in response to this attack that happened. But many people are saying that there's action, that there's all sorts of movement happening, but nobody is punting yet on exactly when that's going to be.
Indeed. I mean, India has blamed Pakistan for orchestrating the attack, in which the death toll is now 26. But no one has actually directly claimed responsibility for what happened.
Right. Well, there were reports that the Resistant Front, the TRF, was a group which has suspected ties to Pakistan-based organizations. They had sort of initially come out and said it was us, and then they retracted that. But you know, everything was so murky, right, in the initial days after the attack. At first, the reports that all 5 attackers in the Pahalgam incident were foreign nationals linked allegedly to this group, the TRF. But then investigations were going on, and then many reports came out and said, oh, actually, one of the attackers in the Pahalgam incident was actually an Indian national. Some people say that person was just a guide, but everybody is trying to figure out who and what is responsible for this. And one thing is for sure, and that is that what people do believe is going to happen is that there will be a visible kinetic escalation. And these are the words being used. Basically, that the response is going to be something that is visible. Because again, if you remember in the last response, when the Indian military had the Balakot airstrike, well, that happened in an area that Pakistan came off and said, oh, that was just a few bombs that went off in an empty field and empty areas. No bombs landed on habited areas. They said it was all uninhabited. Some people say that was a face saver, but there was that basically escalated the whole situation, and it has remained volatile since that attack back in 2019. Border skirmishes and exchanges of fire along the line of control have continued sporadically. We all know diplomatic relations have just deteriorated as both nations back then and now are engaging in tit-for-tat measures, including recently the expulsion of diplomats, restriction of trade. All of this is from the same playbook that we saw before. What is different is that this time tourists were attacked. Indian civilians were attacked. They were asked their religion. They were attacked in front of their families, and they were killed. And everybody is angry. And that is why people are saying that the response that has to happen has to be, quote unquote, visible kinetic escalation. I'm quoting pundits, not the government necessarily, but that's what everybody is suspecting, that if there is going to be a retaliation, this time it will be something that will be seen. There will be no question that whether India made its target or not, like there was in the last retaliation.
And to have 2 neighbours squaring off like this, I mean, both of them being nuclear armed, let's not forget that. What are the repercussions regionally?
Oh, I mean, everybody's nervous. Everybody's talking about it. You can remember, was it 15, 20 years ago when there were the million men on both sides, the soldiers on both sides of the border? We've been here before. These are two, as you say, nuclear armed nations, and people get very scared. We know that in Delhi, I've always heard that it's 7 minutes that there would be a warning given if Pakistan were to strike Delhi. There'd be 7 minutes. People are aware of that. When I first moved here, some 20 years ago, you used to hear a big alarm going off, and that alarm was from decades ago. That would it was just testing the alarm bells to show that it was going off. But there's that residual fear always here, and that is making people angry, as you can see on social media. It's making people angry, as you can see in the media. But at the end of the day, nobody wants war, nobody wants escalation. But I think people are just in a state of shock at the brazenness of this attack. And that when things were going well, people in Kashmir were happy that things eventually, they might not have been happy with the Indian government, but the result of the abrogation of Article 370 is that it meant that people could open up their movie theaters and their hair salons and resume some sort of normalcy. Tourists could come back and go to those beautiful hills known as the Switzerland of the East. Everybody was perhaps lulled into this sense of safety and security, and that things might actually be taking and turning a corner. I have a friend an associate who has a tourist spot in that area, a homestay that she lets out to people, and she's absolutely devastated because I think that people feel that this is a turning point. This is something massive that's happened.
Lindy Prickett, thank you so much for joining us on the line from New Delhi. You're listening to Monocle Radio. This is The Globalist with me, Emma Nelson. Still to come on today's programme.
Como saben, se ha producido en el día de hoy una fuerte oscilación en términos técnicos en el sistema eléctrico europeo que ha desencadenado una interrupción generalizada del suministro en toda la península ibérica y en algunas zonas del sur de Francia.
That was the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez talking about yesterday's power outage. We'll have the latest to find out whether the electricity is back on. Stay with us. Time now to continue with today's newspapers. Joining me down the line is Robin Brandt, former BBC presenter and correspondent in China and the US. Good morning, Robin. How are you?
Morning, Emma. I'm good, thank you.
Good to have you with us. Right, what have you spotted?
Well, let's go to Japan first, something in the Japan Times. Now, you and I and others at Monaco have spoken over recent months about the rise of China as a maritime power. And here's further proof of that in a visit by the US Navy Secretary John Phelan. He is in Japan and then on to South Korea because basically he wants the Americans and those two allies to talk about building more ships. Doing it together. There's a MAGA element as well. He wants to bring some of that investment from the Koreans in particular, who are maritime construction powerhouse, back to the US. And what this is all about is trying to counter the dominance now that China's People's Liberation Army Navy has, not just in terms of the amount of ships that they're building, but the capacity these ships have. There's this kind of civil military fusion. They have a day-to-day role in civil life, but potentially could be used as well when it comes to, say, maybe invading somewhere like Taiwan. And so, yet again, we're seeing evidence of the US trying to catch up, frankly. I have to say, I think that's quite a task. The Chinese are way ahead of them. But we get these visits and we get these negotiations. And at the moment, it's Japan and then on to South Korea. And
this is an important moment for Japan, isn't it?
Yeah, because, we often cite Japan as being obviously a decades-old ally of the United States, hugely important economically and industrially, but it has a very close trading relationship with China as well, and it often finds itself stuck in the middle, and that's exactly where it is at the moment in terms of when it comes to some of its advanced technological exports, its trading relationship with China, on which it is increasingly very reliant when it comes to heavy industry as well, and yet for its security, it has very close ties, obviously, with the United States. It's always a bit of a balance for Japan and its government of the day.
This interesting part about the purpose of the ship as well would be that this idea of a dual-use ship, which is a commercial ship, which is then used to support combat vessels. I mean, how unusual an idea is this?
Well, it's not at all, really. You look back to the Second World War in parts of Europe in particular, and we had these civil vessels, whether it's fuel, whether it's roll-on, roll-off ferries, whether it's vessels that are able to carry people and at times soldiers and get them on land quickly. And that is what John Phelan, the US Navy Secretary, is citing in some of these comments to the Japan Times. And the Chinese, they know, have been very good at continuing with this, what's referred to as a civil military fusion. Some of these ships in China very often are built to military standards, even though day to day at the moment they're used for civil purposes.
Let's move on to a story that you found in the Mail and the Guardian. If you're travelling through Addis Ababa airport, you're probably travelling in one of the druggiest airports in Africa.
Yeah, I mean, the United Nations thinks that Bole Airport in Addis, which apparently in terms of pure numbers is the busiest airport in continental Africa. Bole Airport is now one of the most porous as well when it comes to the ability of smugglers to get through what security they have there and get cocaine and other various types of banned substances to other parts of the world. The UN regards it now as a major trafficking hub. This piece in the Mail and Guardian starts with a tragic story of a 37-year-old Kenyan woman who is saved for now from execution in Vietnam, where she was arrested and convicted for smuggling 2 kilograms of cocaine. Her journey began at Bole Airport back in Addis, and the paper just uses this as an example to demonstrate now how the airport there has become a major hub and a major problem for the Ethiopian government and, of course, for others who are trying to counter the drug trade. I mean, I recall as well being in China how good those bilateral relationships were between the government of China and Ethiopia. There were constant flights between Addis and mainland China. That, of course, opens up the rest of Southeast Asia as well. So where the bilateral ties are good, often the trade and logistical ties are good. And that's often where people like doing this kind of business will flock to as well.
And if you have Africa's busiest airport having very, sort of lax security that can allow bags of drugs to be transported quite easily and without being picked up, and then if you have Ethiopian Airlines, which is, the last time I checked, Africa's biggest airline, the idea of soft power does really comes into play here, doesn't it? Because the when you just look around, the visual impact of a story like this is not good.
No, it's not. And again, if you want an open economy, if you want an economy that can reach out to other parts of the world, can encourage investment into Ethiopia from abroad, allow people to travel between Addis and various other parts of the world, then you need to be open in other senses as well. But if you just look into some of the details in this story in the Mail and Guardian, it doesn't paint the Ethiopian officials in a particularly positive way at all. It's still not clear if a promise of hundreds of sniffer dogs, who have a key role, of course, to ensure that smuggling isn't happening in Addis, it still isn't clear if a promise of those hundreds of sniffer dogs apparently coming from the Netherlands ever arrived. It also goes into some details as well about a more troubling element of the airport, not uncommon at all to that airport, which is corruption and people trafficking and the ability or the inability of some Ethiopians simply to get through the airport and to leave their country at will.
Let's move on to a story from the New York Times, a rather charming one, actually, because the US Supreme Court is often the subject of an enormous amount of scrutiny, not least at the moment, given its efforts, its ability or lack thereof to try to put a check on the executive orders coming from Donald Trump. But there is a story of one man who does not occupy a very prominent place, but had his moment of glory yesterday.
Yeah, and I chose this, Emma, because it's very interesting, because this is the highest of institutions, of course, that sits in Washington, D.C. and has a huge influence over, the makeup of society in the US, the relationship between federal government and state government, the rights of Americans. And as you say, the focus very much on the Trump administration's attempts at the moment to kind of circumnavigate some of those legal checks and balances in power. And yet, we don't really hear much about the people involved in it. We know about the 9 justices. It's very divided at the moment, a 6-3 split to the Republican side. But this is a great story about a man called Edwin Needler. I'd never heard of him. I'd be amazed if anyone listening had ever heard of him. He's a government lawyer in the Solicitor General's office. He's been arguing cases for decades in front of the Supremes of various political persuasions, 160 in all, and now he's leaving. He's retiring. He's 79. And just the other day, the Chief Justice, John Roberts, took a moment at the end of his 160th argument to praise him, to thank him for his candour in particularly. And apparently, the New York Times reports that there were applause. There was a standing ovation of some sitting in the courtroom, and this was joined by the 9 justices together. Not often at the moment we get anything that brings those 9 justices together, but apparently the departure of Edwin Needler did do that.
Robin Brent, thank you as ever for joining us on Monocle Radio. The time here in London is just nudging 7:30 a.m. You're listening to The Globalist with me, Emma Nelson. And look now at some of the other stories we're keeping an eye on today. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused Russia of trying to manipulate and deceive the world by declaring a 3-day unilateral ceasefire for next week. The Kremlin said the pause in fighting would run from the 8th to the 11th of May, coinciding with celebrations to mark the defeat of Nazi Germany in 1945. The head of the Israeli Domestic Intelligence Service, Ronen Bar, has resigned in the wake of a fierce dispute with the Prime Minister. His resignation comes a day after Benjamin Netanyahu presented an affidavit to the Supreme Court in which he accused Mr. Bar of being a liar. Mr. Bar had accused the Prime Minister of demanding excessive personal loyalty. And Iran's interior minister says a deadly explosion at the country's largest commercial port was caused by negligence and a failure to comply with safety measures. The blast on Saturday killed 65 people and injured more than 1,000. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. Now for a look behind the headlines, here's our reporter Conla Stokes on how Ho Chi Minh City is preparing for the anniversary of Vietnam's reunification.
The mood in Ho Chi Minh City has surely never been this giddy or patriotic. The 50th anniversary of Vietnam's reunification falls on April 30th, but celebrations are already well underway. For the past week, jubilant locals draped in red and gold packed the streets to witness fireworks, military parades, marching bands, live music, and fighter jets roaring overhead, all in preparation for the big day. At the heart of the festivities, on Nguyen Hue Boulevard, close to the bronze statue of Ho Chi Minh, is Bac Dang, an open-air installation by artist Lê Hữu Hio. The lacquered wooden stakes and towering forms of this newly commissioned piece pay tribute to an audacious naval victory in 1288, when Vietnamese forces defied the odds and turned the tides against a vast Mongol fleet. Bac Dang is a reminder that, time and again, the Vietnamese have charted their own path among shifting currents. From the southern hub to the capital of Hanoi, this week many will be drinking to just that.
And that was Conla Stokes. For more from Monocle's editors and correspondents, sign up for our free daily newsletter, The Monocle Minute, at monocle.com/minute. 8:32 in Nuremberg, 7:32 a.m. here in London. Now, a state of emergency has been declared in parts of Spain, which have been badly affected by a major blackout. Millions of people have been without electricity, phone or internet. Spanish authorities have warned it could be days before full power is restored. Joining me on the line from Ibiza, which is where he is currently stranded because he can't travel to mainland Spain, is Monocle's Madrid correspondent Liam Aldous. Good morning, Liam.
Good morning. We're back. We've got power and internet. It's great to talk to you.
It is. We are very, very grateful for that. Thank you so much. But yesterday, things were very different.
They were. It was funny because I had a flight back to the mainland, but it was cancelled. I didn't know why. And it was funny because most of the people on this beautiful island didn't even know what was happening in mainland Spain, which really underscores the paradise, near paradise-like element of this island. But across the whole country, it was really, really interesting. I was talking to friends when the power came back on, and they were telling me how in Madrid, for example, first there was a bit of chaos and hysteria. But then people just kind of leaned into the fact there was no power and gathered in plazas, went to the bars, sat at terraces. There were people playing guitar. It was very festive, actually. It was kind of this is again the reason I love living in Spain. Whenever there's a crisis, the best side of the Spanish people come out.
Indeed, you've almost made it seem to be a positive thing, but this really has been something which, if you were trying to get something done in Spain, was a major problem, given the fact that it was so widespread.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously there was a nice element. Some people are underscoring the digital detox side of it, but the country was thrown into a bit of chaos. There were a lot of people worried about loved ones, particularly elderly loved ones, whether they were trapped in elevators. A lot of people were trapped in trains, and there's a lot of images of people having to walk through tunnels and then walk home. And it really, shows how over-reliant we are on a lot of digital systems, because a lot of people also couldn't buy supplies because not many people are using cash anymore. So there was a lot of people who couldn't even buy because the electronic payment systems were down. And it was a big problem.
Do we know now what caused this? Because there has been so much speculation, including what's known as a strong technical fluctuation in the nation's electricity system. But the Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, has been at pains to try to make people not jump to conclusions.
Yeah, he did warn people yesterday not to speculate, and also not to be on their phones too much, to not strain the already strained communications networks. But there still is a lot of speculation. The first news that broke, everyone was saying that it was a cyber attack, and some spokespeople from the government have ruled that out. But it's still very early to be able to rule that out. But there was some news from the Portuguese government saying that it was a large atmospheric variation in the power network because of a temperature fluctuation. Very technical explanation that basically shut down the entire network because there was not enough capacity in the network, and it just started automatically shutting down. Some people have also jumped to conclusions saying that Spain, which has been increasing its renewable electricity capacity in the network, are saying that this also tested the very outdated electronic network of the electricity grid, and it's because of that as well. So there's a lot of people jumping to conclusions, but I guess the truth will eventually come out. I don't like to speculate in the middle of a crisis, just like to wait until things settle, and then the truth always emerges. But I guess we'll see soon.
And the longer term questions, are they being asked yet about Spain's capacity ability to minimise the chances of this happening again? You mentioned the idea of renewable electricity, moving away from fossil fuels, whether it will be able to cope if something like this happens again. What kind of backup systems a country as big and as well put together as Spain is?
Yeah, I guess it really does underline as well that the bigger the system, the more vulnerable it can be as well. So there's a lot of talk about the fact that the electricity system was connected to Portugal and also to the south of France, which also suffered big outages, was the reason that the outages spread, but was also the reason that they were able to restore power within about 9 to 10 hours, because then they got the help of other countries to restore the network. So it's kind of either way there's a problem. But the fact that, for example, the island that I'm on didn't suffer any problems. The phone networks did go down in the evening because they were restoring them, but this island was completely isolated from the bigger system and was able to continue on. So maybe that's a lesson there.
Liam Aldous, Monocle's Madrid correspondent in Ibiza. Thank you so much for joining us on The Globalist. You're listening to Monocle Radio.
With UBS, you have a truly global partner, incorporating new technologies, innovative approaches, and unexpected opportunities, leading you to insights that help answer the questions that matter, delivered with passion, care, and unmatched expertise. Because it's about rising with the dawn each day, knowing that we can do even better. That's what banking is to us. Not just work, but a craft. UBS. Banking is our craft.
15:38 in Tokyo, 8:38 a.m. in Zurich. Now, Japan and Vietnam have agreed to boost trade as Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba met Vietnamese leaders in Hanoi. Both countries are currently engaged in talks with the US to try to avoid tariffs. The world economy is becoming more uncertain, Prime Minister Ishiba said after meeting Vietnam's Prime Minister. Well, joining us now from Tokyo is Peter Landers, who's Asia Business and Finance Editor at the Wall Street Journal. Good afternoon, Peter.
Good afternoon.
So this is Ishiba's first trip to Vietnam, isn't it? A significant one, though.
Right. It comes as both countries are facing the possibility of significant tariffs from the U.S., and both are members of the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal. And I think that's getting more attention, too, as a possible sort of alternative to global free trade agreements now that the U.S. is clearly not in the free trade camp.
So now we have this agreement to boost trade. I mean, what does it look like? We had, not one but 4 cooperation agreements being signed.
Right. And Japan and Vietnam have been friendly for decades. I recall going on the first trip after the Vietnam War by a Japanese prime minister back in 1994. And a colleague who was with me at the time from another news organization said that, the country reminded him of Japan in the 1950s when it was war-torn and quite poor. And in those last 30 years, Japan and Vietnam have developed together. Vietnam in particular has developed into an exporting powerhouse, a lot of Japanese investment, a lot of Chinese investment, factories and rising incomes. So there's been a lot of progress for Vietnam over these 3 decades.
What is it that unites the two countries? I mean, you mentioned their productivity, but in terms of both the trade elements and indeed whether there is any kind of political consensus for two incredibly different countries.
That's right. I think both of them are united in wanting to continue to export to the United States, and they're exporting different things. Japan still exports a lot of cars to the United States. In Vietnam, it would be electronics, clothing, many other goods. So both of them are agreed in trying to work together and prevent President Trump from imposing or reimposing, one might say, the high tariffs that he initially announced. And I would go back to this, the full name of it is CPTPP, this trade agreement that initially the U.S. conceived of as sort of an Asian bloc against China that would exclude China. And under Trump in his first administration, he pulled the U.S. out. That was one of his first actions as president in 2017. And Japan took over as the leader of this trading bloc, which now also includes the U.K., 12 nations. And the question, I think, now is whether Japan, Vietnam, the UK, and other countries could become the core as part of this TPP agreement of a larger global free trading bloc that would leave out the United States, but perhaps allow the more sort of comfort in numbers.
Indeed. So you have this union against the United States, but there are many things that Japan can actually offer the likes of Vietnam. And one of the things that many people are keeping an eye on is this study for the future construction of a high-speed railway between Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. This is very much a Japanese project.
Right. Japan would love to cooperate with other Asian nations to build high-speed rail. They tried in Indonesia. They have participated in projects in India as well. And China has a great high-speed rail network as well. And so there's always a competition, especially in the case of Indonesia, whether the leading partner should be the Japanese team or the Chinese team. In the case of this Hanoi-Ho Chi Minh rail connection, it's been discussed for quite a long time now. It's been very slow in coming. It certainly would be convenient. A colleague of mine was just in Ho Chi Minh City, had to fly back to Hanoi, as everyone does. It could be a real sort of artery of commerce in Vietnam, but I think it's going to take a long time to complete, even if Japan does give full cooperation.
What about the military aspect of this, given the fact that I think it was last year that the two countries signed a reciprocal access agreement, which is a defence pact which allows each nation's troops to be stationed on each other's soil. Now, Japan has yet to ratify this, but it does signal a closer union in terms of the military.
That's right. Japan has, traditionally was had sort of a pacifist orientation, and its troops didn't stray very far or at all from Japan's own borders. But increasingly, Japan has taken a bigger role in cooperation with the U.S., in fact, at least until now, in promoting regional security. And I think Vietnam is trying to play all sides. It's right next to China. It has a good relationship with Russia as well. And I think President Putin might have visited Vietnam in recent years. I have to check my memory on that one. But Vietnam does have close relations with Russia, tries to keep good ties with the U.S., Japan, and China. So on the defense side as well, it is, of course, concerned about being so close to a giant country with a huge military like China, but it doesn't want to burn bridges either. So it's trying to play well with all of the regional powers.
Peter Landers from the Wall Street Journal in Tokyo, thank you so much for joining us on The Globalist. You're with Monocle Radio. Time now for the latest news coming out of Switzerland. Desiree Bandley is Monocle's radio producer based in Zurich. A very good morning to you, Desi. How's Zurich looking today?
Good morning, Emma. Zurich is looking beautiful. The sun is out. Everyone's ready to start the week, basically, because yesterday was like semi-off. So, no, it's beautiful. Zurich is beautiful.
Yes, there is this semi-off thing that happens once a year in Zurich, that you all get half a day. Talk us through that.
So, basically, I'm not sure if it exists anywhere else, to be honest. It's some of those, honestly, it's not an official holiday, but what people do, they stop working at like 2, 3, 4, and it happens twice a year in Zurich at least. So we've got Sechseleuten, which was yesterday, and then we've got Knabenschießen, which is, I think, in October. But what companies have recently done is that they've said, look, this semi-off, it doesn't really make sense, so let's switch it up to one of those days is fully off and the other one we work.
Oh, that's not so fair. The prospect of an afternoon off is marvellous unless it touches 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then one wonders why you should bother. We'll come to Sechseleuten in a minute because that's a big thing in Zurich. But in terms of what the papers are talking about, the NZZ has a story about Swiss soldiers.
Yes. So that's basically, so here in Switzerland, every man needs to do military service. If they don't want to do that, they can do civilian service. And what happens is after you finish the military service, you get to decide if you want to take your gun home, your rifle. And in recent years, at least last year and the year before, around 19% of departing soldiers decided to take home their gun, which is an increase to 11% in 2016. Now, what you need to do to get this gun home is you need to have at least done 4 federal shooting exercises in the last 3 years. You need to change the gun. If it's a rifle, you need to change it from automatic to semi-automatic, and you need to obtain a permit. But this permit you kind of get automatically once you've done those steps before. And that's an increase which is not really clear. So the military is not giving out any details of why that is. Is it because of the Ukraine? Is it because there's a general unsettling feeling of you want to be ready to protect yourself? It's not clear, but what is clear that more people want to have their gun with them.
And so, I mean, anecdotally, is there any reason why people are deciding to keep their guns? And you talked about the Ukraine conflict, but to have more guns in circulation in a country will inevitably increase risk.
It will, and that's also why left-wing parties and actually also the public has said we don't want to loosen those laws. And it will also, there were lots of studies done who said it's not just the risk to others, it's also the risk to yourself. So if you have a gun at home, it's a bigger chance that something might happen. And what's now coming up as well is there's another initiative also from the right-wing party that wants you to be allowed to take home ammunition. Because so far it's been the case that even though you take home your gun, you're not allowed to have ammunition with it. And now there's a petition about to start that says we want what's called Taschenmunition, so like a small pocket round of ammunition that everyone gets to keep at home so they're ready to fight whenever.
I do like the idea of, I don't like the idea of Taschen, like a small pocket amount of bullets that you can keep at home. I mean, how much, just generally speaking, is there a discussion around Swiss dinner tables about the keeping of a gun and whether people actually do sort of think about it that much?
I think it's something that's actually such ingrained in our culture, because it used to be, so if you go back a generation, it was completely normal to have guns at home. Only in the last few decades, these laws were increased. But I do think nowadays people are opposed to having just guns at home in case of a war, because we almost argue that we should much rather spend our energy in being sure that we're ready otherwise. For example, do the military people know where to gather in case something happens? Like, what does it bring us if everyone has a gun at home, but then where do we go from there?
Let's move on to a story which plagues the Swiss psyche, which is, when should they be allowed to go shopping?
Yes. So the canton of St. Gallen, people get to vote for the fourth time about opening hours in the canton, which in Switzerland, it's by law, the cantons can decide how they want to keep the shops open. The canton of St. Gallen has very strict laws currently. That means that weekdays, stores have to close at 7, and on Saturdays even at 5 o'clock. And this new proposal now wants to say, look, you can keep your shops open from 7 till 10, weekdays and Saturdays. And they argue that it's flexible for businesses, consumers, and that it just goes with the time. Although I have to say that, for example, the Cantonal Trade Association there in St. Gallen is actually opposing it, saying it would only benefit the larger retailers and not the small shops.
And the interesting thing with this is that there's absolutely no mention of anything opening on a Sunday.
No, and we won't even go there. So we have so what we have is, for every canton can have 4 Sundays open a year, and that will not change. And we have many votes about this. It's the people they want to keep their Sunday shopping free. But the interesting thing is, if you're in a tourist region, for example, you can open on a Sunday. If you're by a train station, you can open on a Sunday, and you just have to pass by there and you see people do want to shop. Like, those shops are full constantly on Sundays. But this law is probably not going to be accepted, because it's just not, I don't know, we are a bit strange when it comes to opening hours of shops. And if you compare it to other cantons, for example, St. Gallen is quite strict. That's also a point that they're saying, look, our neighboring cantons are opening much longer. So basically people just don't shop in our canton, they shop around us.
Desi, we're going to have to ask you very briefly, though, and there's something that I promised that I'd ask you. It's just the Sechserleut, and anybody who's seen Puxatawny Pete in Groundhog Day will know the importance of a slightly odd ritual which determines the weather. Zurich has the same thing, but you set fire to something, don't you?
Same thing, we set fire to something. So it's a traditional spring festival, and we set fire to the Berg. The Berg is a huge snowman. It's about 4 meters high. It's filled with explosives. And basically, whenever its head blows off, that time determines how summer will be. We had that yesterday. It blew off at 26:30, which is not the greatest time, especially given it was so dry. So we should have like a semi-great summer, if we trust it.
I'm going to hold up. We're going to record that and keep playing it back to you. We're going to have a semi-great summer because of an exploding snowman. Desi Bandley, thank you so much for joining us on Monocle Radio. You're listening to The Globalist, and last week, Monocle's annual conference, known as the Chiefs, took place in Jakarta.
Bright Spot Market started in 2009, and it's actually a market where a lot of young entrepreneurs, creatives, can actually showcase and retail their things. And this is something that they didn't have a platform before that. So 2009, we had a market over a weekend, and we had about 20 booths, about maybe 4,000, 5,000 people through the door. And 16 years later, now we're going to have another one May 28th, and with 240 brands, with 1,200 applications, and we expect over 100,000 people over the event.
And why do 100,000 people turn up for the market? What is it that you're doing that other people aren't doing in the world of retail? What's the excitement that you're bringing to people?
I think the excitement is just the energy, the creativity, It's everyone, young, creative, coming together, band together, and like pushing this energy and this movement together. So we always feel like it's a community more than just a business, and everybody really intertwines in the way they do their day-to-day business.
So there's a retail arm that's grown from that, the goods department. There's Oaken Lamps now. There's a fragrance brand as well that you do with your partner. All of these coming out of this initial inspiration and meeting all these creatives in a way.
Yeah, so the goods department is a retail shop that we created maybe a year and a half in after we started Bright Spot. So with before Bright Spot, these local brands, most of them didn't exist before that. So because of Bright Spot, a lot of these young creatives starting to build their brands. So now we have a roster of brands that we can actually house in the goods department, mixing with international brands. So this multi-brand store became like a big cultural hub for the young audience of Jakarta. And later on, we sold the company. After 7 years, we managed to buy it back.
Always a good deal. If you sell something for a nice high price, buy it back cheap, do it again. I'm with you. So now we have goods department back. We have no partners, no investors. It's all just like us. The Bright Spot Group now owns this, and now we're rebuilding it. It wasn't doing well when we bought it back, of course. But yeah. So, and then during that time when we sold the goods department, Chris and I, my partner, he got into learning perfumery, so he's the nose of Oaken Lab and the formulator, and it's our creative expression. So and we use Bright Spot as the platform to launch the brand. Now, tell me, for you, Cynthia, when you look at this talent pool and when you're trying to start a business, tell me about the mechanics around a business. Is it easy to find the staff and the young generation that you want to come into your business here?
Actually, for goods department, we definitely can attract that just because of we always hire people from universities, like part-time college students and things like that, and that was new. So with that culture continues throughout these years where we do get a really good talent pool, and the ones that worked for goods department or our other companies, Bright Spot, they became the sought after people in the industry.
And just tell me this balance. So we're hearing there's a demand. You brought a brand in from Japan to do coffee. What's that balance between local and international? We walk around the malls here. We can see lots of international brands here. You told me that actually maybe like a decade ago, you saw a change, partly because of the work that you were doing, where young Indonesians went from always wanting something that was from abroad to finally valuing the craft and the things that were made here. Is that still a story that's progressing, that people are reinvesting in made in Indonesia?
Yes, definitely. I think when we started Bright Spot, Indonesian products were just kind of cheap products, or sometimes they copy designs from overseas. But now they are more innovative. The designers are actually people that just, they graduate from St. Martin's or Milan or France, and they come back and they have opportunities to start their brands because Indonesia is a manufacturing country. So they can start, their small business, and the business actually sustain in Indonesia. Like the people now, they actually line out the door for a new release of a local product. And also what's interesting that a lot of the brands are now going more in depth in like the way the products are made. So they go kind of more vertical to weaving, to the dyeing. And I think that will trickle nicely to the economy of even outside of Jakarta, even villages.
Cynthia Wajono, co-founder of Bright Spot Market, talking to Monocle's Andrew Tuck at last week's annual Monocle conference known as the Chiefs. And that's all the time we have for today's programme. The warmest of thanks to all my guests and to the producers, Anita Riotta and Chris Chermak. Our researcher was Francesca Gilks. Our studio manager was Lily Austin. After the headlines, more music on the way. The briefings at midday here in London. The Globalist is back at the same time tomorrow. But for now, from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thank you very much for listening.